Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another video on international business environment. Today in this video we're going to study about emerging issues in international business environment. There's a growing concern for ecology in the it is an environmental issue, right? So economy and ecology cannot be considered separately. Both are necessary for the development of a nation, we all know. But industrialization, urbanization, and improved transport have brought economic benefits and improvements to human well-being across the globe, right? But however, these processes have also led to environmental degradation and climate change, threatening the prospects of future generations to reap similar benefits. Many harmful effects are localized, impairing the living conditions and natural environment of communities. Concentration of air and water pollution are now recognized as causing ill health, threatening future gains in well-being which economic development makes possible. Of the challenges facing the planet, climate change is the most pervasive, including rising sea level, floods, droughts, and extreme weather events. Next is reducing emissions of greenhouse gases, largely resulting from the burning of fossil fuels, is recognized as the key of curbing climate change impacts. Responses to environmental concerns by national governments have been mixed. Many have taken policy steps to curtail emissions while others remain focused on economic growth. However, developing countries are now in a spotlight, in particular China and India, with the rapidly increasing greenhouse emissions. So environmental strategies entail possible changes in operations and sourcing performances, targets, and monitoring. So international business with operations in diverse locations must focus on a variety of environmental impacts, which are increasingly recognized in global corporate strategy. While regulation is a driver in some countries, in others, such as developing countries, motivations stem from principles concerns about sustainable development as well as perceived risks to future financial performance. Although operational changes and rising costs for scarce resources present a gloomy picture, the opportunities for innovation and efficiency gains have spurred many forward-thinking companies like to devise creative solutions which can be source of competitive advantage. Stakeholders, including investors and consumers, have taken a growing interest in corporate green credentials, but are only gradually recognizing the implications for changes in their own patterns of consumption. Legislation is beginning in some areas, such as waste recycling, and in others, the hope is that business innovations are producing cleaner alternatives which meet consumer expectations without the need to make painful changes to lifestyle. Now, we are faced with numerous social and ecological challenges at the global level that we have to resolve as soon as possible through a combination of innovative ideas and viable solutions by the hundreds of countries that make up the planet. Our generation will be responsible for taking specific measures to ensure a prompt and balanced solution for all. We are seeing an incredible race by the leading world economies to obtain control of the environment. These globalized nations must take on the challenge of international leadership in the area of sustainability with the greatest possible transparency. There's no doubt that the current trend points to an exponential growth in the relationship between economic development and the destruction of the of the environment, which highlights that the way in which humans can rapidly use up the natural system and exert their pressure in an unsustainable way. The holistic relationship between economy and ecology has been a source of considerable interest in recent decades in order to build a model of sustainable development based on regulating the use of natural resources, so as to safeguard them and guarantee the proper management for the future. So most companies have not only been able to adapt to global economic changes. They have also realized that the only way to continue increasing their productive capacity is by contributing to the sustainability of natural resources and incorporate social, technological, cultural, and ethical issues. Right. So the relationship between the environment, uh, social engagement, and economic planning. The relation between these three is the key to increasing corporate social responsibility and securing the trust of communities, right? Customers and suppliers, while ensuring the acceptance of the product or service as a sustainable element. Now, corporate environmental performance must be assessed by identifying ongoing improvements that create optimum conditions for the process of planning, production, and commercialization. In addition to generating beneficial opportunities for workers, customers, suppliers, and others, of course. So, in this time of crisis, social and environmental innovations have become particularly important in alleviating some of the serious consequences of intolerable acts uh, perpetrated against the natural environment that have forced societies and corporations to come up with other economic and productive models that allow the balance between economic, social, ecological resources. It's very important to maintain a balance between these three. And in response to these paradoxes, environmental management is one of the surest way to achieve the aims of environmental improvement, right? Now, so the environmental management is one of the keys to the success of corporations and organizations and should be seen as synonym with well-being, both as a way of obtaining an economic or productive advantage, but also to achieve the goal of improving societies and the improvements in the environment. Now, the next is outsourcing and global value chains. Now, outsourcing economics has a double meaning. First, it is a book about the economics of outsourcing. Second, it examines the way that economists have understood globalization as a pure market phenomenon. Now, the result have outsourced the explanation of what economic forces to other disciplines. Market are embedded in a set of institutions like labor, government, corporate that mold the power asymmetries that influence distribution of the gain from globalization. The offshoring reduces employment and raises income inequality in countries that lack institutions supporting workers. Now, they also find that offshoring allows firms to reduce domestic investment and focus on finance and short-term stock movements. Now, drawing on recent studies about financialization and corporate governance, you argue that the advance of finance has not only transformed the wider global economic landscape, but recast labor markets and labor relations in ways that has reduced unionized employment. General expectations are that the rise of finance shifts from priorities away from physical investment and payrolls towards financial channels and short-term benchmark in large measure because of how finance has enabled firms to build their market power and serve only top management investors under the guise of enhancing shareholders' value, right? So let's understand the global value chains. Now, global value chains refer to international production sharing, a phenomenon where production is broken into activities and tasks carried out in different countries. So they can be thought of a large-scale extension of division of labor dating back to Adam Smith's time. The global chain provides opportunities for developing countries to diversify their exports and intensify their integration into the global economy. The global value chains describe the cross-national activities and inputs required to bring a product or service to the market. Some experience large-scale manufacturing employment, while others see a shift in demand for labor from manufacturing to services and from lower to higher skills. So value chain analysis allows businesses to examine their activities and find Competitive advantage. For example, McDonald's mission is to provide customers with low priced food items, right? So your assignment is explain with example of a value chain analysis for McDonald's and its cost leadership strategy. This is your assignment. You have to do it. Uh, just study it deeply. You'll gain more knowledge about the global value chains. The next topic is labor issues. Although MNEs have tended to view a national law as the extent of their legal obligation, adherence to international labor standards and moral obligations to a wider range of stakeholders are increasingly demanding. They are increasingly demanded actually. So managing people from diverse culture, backgrounds and national environments is the formidable task of international human resource management. To add to the challenge, the modern firm demands not simply a diligent workforce, but one made up of workers who identify with corporate goals and managers who prioritize employees' needs and personal goals. So that's the added challenge. So while it was once thought that Western HR policies and practices were transferable across cultures, and more recent view is more tentative. So as market forces penetrate economies, especially in developing countries, HR issues are rising up the corporate agenda. HR functions, including selection, compensation, appraisal, and training and development, must take account of different cultural context. So, designing and implementing systems which accord with aspirations of local workers can benefit corporate performance, helping to achieve corporate goals. Cross-cultural competencies are increasingly seen as a core resource within the firm, forming a cornerstone of its competitive advantage in global markets. Whereas firms have traditionally seen relations between parent firm and subsidiaries as central to strategy, the current global competitive environment presents numerous other organizational options which present both opportunities and challenges. So M&E's internationalized production carried out by independent contractors offer opportunities to reduce cost and achieve economies of scale. But working arrangements and conditions in low-cost environments seldom measure up to the standard of M&E's home countries. The diffusion of responsibility in international operations can mitigate against improving HRM practice. In international joint ventures, partner firms take direct ownership and responsibility, but relations are often bumpy as cultures collide. Right. So acquisition have proved popular as a market entry strategy among M&Es from both the developed and developing world. The integration of HR policies and practices taking account of local differences is crucial to the success of these alliances. In strategies conceived in the boardroom depend on people working together to achieve common goals. A test which should ensure the centrality of IHRM in corporate strategy. Right. The next topic is digitalization. Now, digitalization describes the integration of digital technologies into any aspect of daily life that can be digitized. Digitalization with more business-oriented focus. So, digitalization is the use of digital technology to change a business model and provide new revenue and value-producing opportunities. It is the process of moving to a digital business. So, digitalization is based on the availability of large amounts of external and internal and often cloud-based data from different sources, data mining and machine learning techniques to use it for decision-related purposes, such as the identification of a business opportunity or predictions of future market and client behavior. So, the use of digital technologies allows for a higher speed of internationalization because they help firms learn more quickly about new markets and to develop local networks, resulting in faster local product adaptation and client interaction. By this, you have more information which allows you to make better decisions, right? And technological tools to make your work easier. So when used intelligently, the digitalization of business can lead to a significant increase in productivity and can reduce some cost. So digitization is of crucial importance to data processing, storage, transmission. Why? Because it allows information of all kinds in all formats and to be carried with the same efficiency and also intermingled. So executives are digitally transforming three key areas of their enterprises, like the customer experiences, next is the operational processes, and lastly is business models. And each of these three pillars has different elements that are changing, right? Now, lean global companies need to internationalize early and fast. So, digitization of a new foreign market development helps them to more efficiently identify new markets and market opportunities in global markets. With this approach, they are saving resources, these lean global companies, and while developing the most attractive markets. So, digitalization allows global companies to increase decision making efficiency and to optimize strategies and processes for evaluating international markets. The global companies can benefit from the use of digital technologies. How? By applying a more efficient financial market development process with regular reviews and a reduced workflow, by faster mediation between local market realities and strategic goals, and by analyzing all foreign market instead of just a sample of them, and by optimizing decision making processes, including the ability to make long term strategic decisions due to better market information because of digitization, right? Because the speed of creating this intellectual and social capital determines the speed of internationalization. Digitalization in the sense of predictive analytics using, for example, artificial intelligence algorithms help global companies to predict the future attractiveness of foreign markets. Better predictions will increase the efficiency of course and quality of market selection decisions and the opportunities to participate in the future market growth. Also, the knowledge about foreign markets increases your international performance. So, digitalization creates social data, that is market network, and intellectual data, that is market knowledge, about foreign markets earlier and faster than other methods. So, while also improving firms' attractiveness, decision processes and capabilities of decision makers also enhances, it increases. So, although decisions are often based on historical data, of course, or on experiences from other markets, a new market entry is a long-term investment in the future attractiveness of an untested foreign country. So, if a firm decides to enter a new market in a given year, the decision is often based on historical market data, that is, from 2 or more years earlier. But the effects of the decision, that is significant new clients and sales revenue, will take place approximately 2 years later. So, therefore, predictive algorithms should be used to assess future market attractiveness. It's very important to be safe, right? So, although predictive algorithms cannot eliminate uncertainty, they can improve allocations of resources and prioritization of projects. They can help to take decision in the best way. So, international managers must manage digitalization carefully by mediating between local market realities and corporate goals and understanding the limits and benefits of digitalization, of course. So, to assess the usefulness of prediction models, we must evaluate them not on their ability to recapitulate historical trends, but instead of on their accuracy in predicting future events. So, this is how digitalization can be used for faster and speedier internationalization, right? The next topic is impact of pandemic COVID-19 on international trade. The very hot topic nowadays, and everybody's speaking about it, right? So it is unavoidable that the novel coronavirus epidemic will have a considerable impact on the economy and society. The spread of the new coronavirus is a public health crisis that could pose a serious risk to the macro economy through the halt in production activities, interruptions of people's movements, and cut off supply chains. Like for example, Honda Motor Company will reduce vehicle output at two of its domestic plants in Saitama Prefecture for a week or so in March due to concerns about parts supply from China, where a new coronavirus outbreak continues to disrupt economic activities. So this is one of the halt in productions, right? Besides its warning effects on human life, the novel strain of coronavirus, its COVID-19, has the potential to significantly slow down not only the Chinese economy but also the global economy. Now, China has become the central manufacturing hub of many global business operations, also for India, I know. So, any disruption of China's output is expected to have repercussions elsewhere through regional and global value chains, right? So, indeed, most recent data from China indicate a substantial decline in output. This is highly correlated with exports, and such a decline implies a reduction in exports. Now, who are the impacted countries? Let's find out. See, a reduction in Chinese supply of intermediate inputs can affect the productive capacity, and therefore the exports of any given country, depending on how reliant its industry are on Chinese suppliers. For example, some European auto manufacturers may face the shortage of critical components for their operations. Companies in Japan may find difficult to obtain parts necessary for the assembly of digital cameras and so on. For many companies, the limited use of inventories brought by a lean and just-in-time manufacturing processes would result in shortages that will impact their production capabilities and overall exports. So, the potential effect of COVID-19 on exports is the most exposed countries to Chinese supply disruptions. Overall, the most impacted economics will be European Union, machinery, automotive, and chemicals. The United States for machinery, automotive, precision instruments. The next is Japan for machinery and automotive. Next is the Republic of China, Republic of Korea, for machinery, communication equipment. Taiwan, province of China, communication equipment and office machinery. And the last is the Vietnam for communication equipment. These are the impacted countries for so and so products, right? So impact on global value chains during the last 2 decades, China has become crucial to the global economy. China's rising importance in the global economy is not only related to its status as a manufacturer and exporter of consumer products, but China has become the main supplier of intermediate inputs for manufacturing companies abroad. As of today, about 20% of global trade in manufacturing intermediate products originates in China, up to 4% in 2002. So let's consider two scenarios, a global pandemic and an amplified global pandemic. In case of the global pandemic, it is assumed that countries bear only one half of the impact of the full China shock. In the case of the amplified global pandemic, the shocks are uniform across all countries. So a baseline global pandemic scenario sees GDP of the world fall by 2% below the baseline of developing countries by 2.5% and of industrial countries by 1.8%. Now the declines are nearly twice as large in an amplified pandemic scenario in which containment is assumed to take longer. Production elasticities have been reduced to near zero. So there is little substitution possibilities across inputs in production. So in order to capture the typically durable relationship within global value chains, trade elasticities for goods have been reduced from their standard values to represent the short-run inability to replace imported components and, of course, final goods with products from other countries. Labor supply is exogenous, while wages adjust to equate demand and supply of labor. The return to capital is fixed, while supply of capital is endogenous, right? The first shock is a drop in employment by 3% below the baseline. With lower availability of labor, you would expect wages to rise, while return to capital is unchanged under our assumptions. Now, lower labor also means lower demand for capital, right? As firms need a combination of labor and capital to produce goods and services, we know that. So underutilization of capacity takes place due to factory closures, workers stay home, leaving capital and natural resources idle, as well as society distancing, forcing workers to stay at home. So, due to higher rates of contagion, immediate unemployment consequences of COVID-related business closures, and negative demand shock, we conservatively assume the underutilization of labor force by 3% on an average over the whole year across all sectors of the economy. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding these assumptions, and the country specific employment effects will depend on the duration and intensity of the pandemic and the containment measures, the sectorial composition of employment, and the flexibility of the labor market. Right? So the second shock, cumulative with the supply shock, raises the international trade cost of imports and exports by 25%. The shock is applied across all goods and services. Trade costs arise when goods cross borders. The assumed increase in transport and transaction costs in foreign trade is driven by additional inspections, reduced hours of operations, road closures, border closures, increase in transport costs, etc. Right? Since COVID-19 is affecting more countries and the containment measures seem more severe due to efforts of this efforts to contain the virus, we amplify the increasing shock international trade cost of imports and exports to 25%. The third shock entails a sharp drop in international tourism. This is captured via a 50% consumption tax on international tourism. Related services is transport, accommodation, etc. Now, this generates a typically small revenue for the relevant countries that is rebated back to households with a lump sum. The export tax is applied to both outbound and inbound services that include accommodation, food and service activities, water, air, and other transports, and recreational and other services. So the effects of COVID-19 on the tourism, hospitality, and recreational sectors have been unprecedented. In the accommodation and lodging sectors, quarterly revenues are down by 75%. Travel agents saw a slowdown in bookings of 50% by March 2020. Airlines worldwide are expected to lose $113 billion in revenue for 2020. So, in the peak of the outbreak, 70% of scheduled flights in China have been cancelled. So, as of mid-March 2020, international travel has grounded to a halt, with the World Travel and Travel Tourism estimating the global travel would decline at least 25% in 2020. So to capture the effects of the drop in tourism, hospitality and recreation services, like 50% tax on the export of trade related services, resulting in a drop in exports of tourism services at a global level of 20 to 32%. The fourth shock represents a demand switch by households who purchase fewer services requiring close human interactions, such as mass transport, domestic tourism, restaurants, and recreational activities, while redirecting demand towards consumption of goods and other services. So demands are the targeted services. For the target services assumed to drop by 15%. This results in the reallocation of household demand across sectors. While total expenditures are still driven by previous shocks and relative prices of goods in the consumption basket. So it is difficult to estimate the impact of social distancing and overall decline of economic activities on those selected sectors, but anecdotal evidence suggests that it is likely to be significant. With social distancing measures and closures of non-essential businesses, the bookings through Open Table Network declined by 100% in the second half of March, as per the data from different countries. So depending on the length of the business closures, the annual impact could vary drastically. The decline of 50% of an annual level seems like a middle of the road estimate. So to conclude, impact of pandemic on international trade would be underutilization of labor by 3% across all sectors in the global economy, resulting in declined capital usage. Freight cost of global imports and exports increased by 25%, applied across all goods and services. Next, sharp drop in international tourism, captured via 50% tax on inbound and outbound tourist-related services, transport, accommodation, etc. And lastly, reallocation of demand away from sectors requiring human interaction. Right? What are the macroeconomic impacts? Now, the global pandemic scenario assumes that the pandemic hits China the hardest, but also hurts other countries. So we use it as an example to explain the impact on other countries. Now, the global pandemic is expected to reduce China's GDP by 3.7%. All percent changes are reported like in relation to the baseline. The impact of China becomes progressively more negative as impacts of the shock accumulate. First, the supply shock reduces GDP through reduction in employment and capital, leading to lower production and exports, as well as lower imports due to lower income of household and shrinking production. Second, with higher trade costs, the price of a unit of imports and export increases, and the competitiveness of Chinese production declines. Due to higher cost of exporting, of course, and higher cost of inputs, final goods prices also increase. Now, the rising trade cost represents a productivity loss, since additional inputs are needed to bring goods to the consumers. Instead of being available for consumption and investment, further inbound and outbound tourism decreases significantly, resulting in further decline of Chinese GDP and exports. So finally, the consumption of expenditures changing with lower demand for sectors hit by social distancing, transport, hospitality, and relatively higher demand for goods, the consumption of output tilts towards manufacturing. So loss of competitiveness and lower income result in a decline of total exports by 3.5%. So while imports declined by 3.2%, China's exports to tourist-related activities declined by 29%, while imports of tourist-related activities declined by 37%. So real consumption by households declined by 7.2%. Right? So exports at a global level are expected to decrease, of course. Now, China, considered to be the whole world's factory, suffers a decline in production, like across all sectors and goods, due to the underutilization of labor, capital, and together with an increase in the trade cost, increase the import cost for the rest of the world. So, which translates a decline in global exports, of course. So the deep recession under the amplified global pandemic scenario results in negative impacts on exports across all sectors and most destinations. The country-specific results are driven by the initial composition of output and exports by sector and destination, but also by the country's level of openness and relative changes in the competitiveness of the exporting country and its trading partners. So the most impacted are exports of services, especially tourism and services requiring face-to-face interactions. The biggest declines are expected in exports to Europe and EAP, driven by recession and lower demand in these regions. The most destination for US exports in services. So this was all about this video, and I have covered almost all the topics of international business environment till now. I'll be sharing with you the whole of the international business environment videos, my YouTube link. So you can watch all my videos over there. Okay. So thank you for watching, and take care.